behalf of the Chamber, my name is Luther Tsinaglu. I'm the president of the Chamber, and I want to thank you for taking the time to come. This is our second of many forums that we want to make available for questions that are concerning to our community. So this evening, I want to thank first and foremost the City Council members who are here to make themselves available and answer questions. And as we go forward, at this point, I want to thank and introduce our mayor, Ms. Denise Del Mar.
Thank you. Good evening. Because all the city council members were going to try to make it tonight, we did post a special meeting. So at this time, we're just going to quickly open up the meeting, and we'll have our assistant city clerk read roll calls to see who all is here.
Mayor Denise Del Mar.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem John Harabedian. Here. Councilmember Rachelle Arizmendi. Councilmember John Capocha. And Councilmember Jean Goss. Here. Thank you. Mayor.
So thank you all again for coming tonight. We'll have, and thank the Chamber for putting this forum on for all of us. There has been, I hear, a flurry of activity on social media and information coming out. I know that I've received information from some of the residents, and we all thought it was really important that we get the information, the correct information out, because I know some of the stuff that I've been receiving hasn't been quite accurate. It's like right there. So our city manager will be delivering some facts for you, and then of course we'll save time for questions and answers. That's always the most important thing, and why we always want you to come out. There was mention at our last city council meeting that perhaps the city council was taken by surprise by our non-binding agreement with Arcadia, and I just wanted to set the record straight that this is something that we have been working on in the past year. As you all know, we had to bring our fire department to be a professional fire department, and we've been working on that, so we are aware of the issues, and our city manager keeps us abreast of everything that's happening. And again, I want to thank you all for coming. Keep an open mind, hear what the presentation is about, and make sure you write down your questions so we can hear them at the end. Because we have made this a city council meeting, we are going to be allowed to answer questions. The city council will, and so we look forward to that. I'd like to introduce Susan Henderson at this time.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you all again for coming. And the hat I'm wearing tonight is as the director of the chamber. Tonight, I want us to all remember, we all love Sierra Madre. We're all friends. We may disagree, but we love each other. I would like for us to keep things from getting personal, no personal attacks. We'll save that for a fundraiser. And I want us to, we have a brief agenda, and what I'd like to do is to ask everyone, I know if you're here, you have something to say or you have a concern, but we would like to avoid having the same questions or the same statements repeated over and over again. We would not like to be here at 10 o'clock at night. We again thank the council for coming, and we're going to start off tonight with a presentation on the consideration of the Sierra Madre Fire Department reorganization, and I believe Mr. England, our city manager, is going to do that.
So for most of the questions, I'll answer from the dais, but I don't want to block the PowerPoint, so I'll go to my usual seat tonight. I'm going to try and cover a couple of areas where there's been some confusion, and then go over an FAQ for everyone. And then at the end, we'll turn it back over to the chamber and let them get things underway. So there's three types of assistance available to cities: master mutual aid, automatic aid, mutual aid. We're not going to talk about master mutual aid tonight. It's not really applicable to any of the discussions we're having. We're going to focus on automatic aid that we have with County Engine 66, mutual aid with Angeles National Forest, and the Area C agreement dispatched through Verdugo. You'll see there's an asterisk by that. We'll cover that when it gets to that slide.
So the automatic aid we have is with County Engine 66. What the agreement is we respond up to Chantry Flat. They respond into our municipal boundary. It's based on reciprocation, as all automatic or mutual aid agreements are. If we were to stop responding to Chantry Flat, they would stop responding here. The limitation is the assisting agency need not respond if the agency's resources are temporarily depleted. Again, on reciprocation, that's pretty standard language. We have a mutual aid agreement with the Angeles National Forest. We heard this brought up a couple of times at the various meetings that we've had. It's a cooperation agreement for wildland fire management activities only. It's mutual aid. After 12 hours, we're billed. If it's multi-jurisdictional, we go into a cost share. It specifically excludes responses to structure fires, with the exception of certain instances when a structure fire may be in the path of a wildland fire. But in general, they're not responding on structure fires. And again, it's limited to 12 hours prior to billing and/or cost sharing. The one that's caused the most confusion is the Area C mutual or automatic aid agreement that we're calling mutual aid. And it's because the automatic exchange, which is what the contract is based on, contractually excludes Sierra Madre. So it's the agreement between all the other cities is automatic aid. Section 5 says Sierra Madre is excluded from that. What we have is kind of mutual aid in practice, but there's no legal obligation for the other agencies to respond. I have a paste of the section up here on the next slide, but again, it says the other fire agencies may respond if they're requested. So just to be abundantly clear on what is currently in this contract, and to try and clear up some of the information, I want to go through these 4 points. So what does the contract actually say? The title of the contract is Agreement for Automatic Exchange of Fire Services. Again, it's based on reciprocity. Agencies respond in kind into other jurisdictions with their apparatus, personnel, and equipment. Section 5 of that agreement is the exception for Sierra Madre. The total contract's 2.5 pages. It's about 9 sections long. One of the sections is dedicated specifically to excluding Sierra Madre. So what does it entitle us to? The highlighted section says, under mutual aid, other fire agencies may respond into Sierra Madre when additional resources are requested. There's no legal entitlement to services. It states clearly other agencies may respond, and again, the whole contract is based on reciprocity. So services come in, services go out. So when we get to this point, the next question we typically hear is, what about our current practice? And the example people use, the Mount Wilson Trail Fire, they say, when that trail fire came out, everyone came and they were there within minutes, and that's true. Unfortunately, that's not an example of mutual aid. That's Verdugo realizing that we are overwhelmed and they're going to send all the resources they have. If you talk to their director, they'll say, well, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. That's true. Verdugo is not the agency that begs for forgiveness, however. They're simply the dispatch center. So when the other agencies come in, any obligations for that time come to Sierra Madre, not to Verdugo. The other question we'll get is, don't our engines sometimes call for fire response prior to arriving on scene? I'm sure it's happened. This is another example of non-contractually obligated aid. This isn't what the contract is stated for us to do. And after the Mount Wilson Trail Fire, our neighbors made it abundantly clear that we needed to quit abusing the system. They made it clear that we have to look like them, that we need to be a career department, and that they are tired of providing charity to us and paying their taxpayers paying to put our fires out, quite literally. So the final test to determine if this is a mutual aid agreement is, let's not define aid, let's define mutual. So what is mutual about the aid agreement is, when do we reciprocate services? What services do we reciprocate? And the answer is we don't. We don't go outside of our jurisdiction on fire calls. So if it's a mutual aid agreement and we read it in the contract that's most favorable to us, we overlook may versus will. We say that practice trumps the contract, and we ignore that it's based on inappropriate exchange of fire services, here's the current mutual aid practice that we have. Our neighbors provide aid to Sierra Madre with no reciprocation. Dispatch is sometimes completed without an on-scene assessment. Fire services are provided at no cost to Sierra Madre, and we expect aid to continue in perpetuity without exception and without reciprocation. So again, this is not Sierra Madre being a good neighbor. This is not Sierra Madre participating in automatic aid. And that's one of the reasons after the Mount Wilson trail fire that we went to council and we asked for a reorganization to go to a career department. Now, if I'm wrong about this, which is certainly possible, I make a lot of mistakes, the argument is not whether we are participating in mutual aid or not. The argument is how do we get into automatic aid? So forget everything I've just said, go about believing that we're in a mutual aid contract, and that's totally fine, because what we're talking about is how do we get into automatic aid, not are we in mutual aid, not are we participating in good faith in mutual aid. So the Mount Wilson Trail fire happened, I'd been here about 3 months, and I swear I came in the next week and I thought my door was gonna get kicked down because we were exposed as not providing quality, safe public safety response. And we heard it from our neighbors, and I thought I was gonna hear it from the residents, but everyone kind of went on about their day and talked about how great it was to have all these other agencies come up and provide service to us, and that was great. But our neighbors said, you can't live on our dime anymore. We had one city talk about, actually provided me a copy of a cancellation document. We had another city talking about starting to provide bills to us for their service. So again, how we read mutual aid is only as important as our neighbors read mutual aid. So I want to go over again, because the argument is mutual aid versus automatic aid. So we took the most recent fire, and on the left is what actually happened. How long from first dispatch of engine 41 until we were able to fill out a complete fire response. On the right is how long it took the engines from dispatch to get on scene. So under automatic aid, everyone's dispatched at the same time. So you see engine 41 arrives in 5 minutes and 19 seconds. The next engine arriving under automatic aid would have been engine 107 out of Arcadia. It took them 5 minutes and 29 seconds to get here. The third engine arriving would have been engine 37, 6 minutes and 56 seconds. The fourth would have been truck 105, 10 minutes and 15 seconds. And now what you see, the fifth piece of equipment at 11 minutes and 30 seconds is our automatic aid agreement, County Engine 66. Because we're in mutual aid, we were on Sierra Madre Island as a single piece of equipment at that fire, and our second piece of equipment, our automatic aid, did not arrive until 11 minutes and 30 seconds after dispatch. And on the left, as we fill these times in, these are, again, the time it took from when we were dispatched for other engines to make the scene. So when we get to our full engine response, normally it's 5 pieces, but because Verdugo doesn't count the county, we have 6 dispatched. You can see a full fire response in 11 minutes and 30 seconds as opposed to what would have been 18 minutes and 10 seconds. In this case, final piece of equipment, 12 minutes and 11 seconds versus 20 minutes and 16 seconds. So the whole argument about are we in mutual aid, are we not in mutual aid is really irrelevant to the point that automatic aid is what we need to strive for. That's what we need to achieve if we want to provide safe, competent fire services to the community. So to go through the F.A.Q, and some of these have been online. So did the city vote to disband the fire department? No, the city's moving down parallel paths. Our goal is to get an automatic aid, however you do that. The council vote authorized a study with Arcadia to determine if fire response services were feasible. So for those that saw some confusion, I pulled the actual staff report. I highlighted the area. We've heard a lot. People have laid off. The department's been reorged. People are out of their jobs. The staff report says if an agreement is approved by the city council, the approved reorganization plan will then be implemented. So we're moving down career department, outsource services, both at the same time, both with the goal of getting into automatic aid. So the next question we get is, what is a study for? So even though we've agreed on a non-binding term sheet, we now have to investigate and see if those items are real. Are they possible? Are they feasible? So when we talk about potential costs, people will see it's $800,000 in year one. They'll say, great deal, what about year two? They're going to kill us on costs in year two. Hasn't been negotiated yet. We have to determine through a study if the other items, including costs, are even feasible. And that's where we're at right now. And the $20,000 funds are to cover staff time and materials for Arcadia. I hear that question a lot, why are we paying taxpayers' money on a study? And it's typically from people who also don't have an issue with Pasadena, Arcadia, Monrovia fire coming up and putting out our fires without being reimbursed for it. So the irony of the argument is not lost on me. So is it a done deal? No, as we just went over. 2 paths. We actually have an engineer's test tomorrow. We have 2 vacancies, and we're hoping to certify 2 engineers to bring us up to fully staffed, fully paid career department. And we'll cover in a little bit, but the second path, the fire services agreement with Arcadia, is at phase 1 of what is like 1,000 steps. So when we talk about the other steps in another slide, we're really at the beginning. We haven't even determined if this is practical yet. Sierra Madre won't have an engine or appropriate personnel in an emergency if this happens is speculation. Again, this has to be negotiated in an MOU. If you're hearing that fires are going to burn and no one will be there to put them out and they'll spread without end, we haven't negotiated or agreed upon what an appropriate emergency response will look like yet. So again, it's just speculation. Why aren't we an automatic aid like everyone else? It's a pretty simple answer. We currently and historically are not staffed like other departments. We cannot currently and historically reciprocate services, and we have yet to prove that we can staff like other agencies or reciprocate services. So until we're able to do all of this, the door to automatic aid is not even going to be open for us. I've read we have mutual aid, which is good enough for Sierra Madre. I have read we have an automatic aid with the county. We don't need to participate. As we've talked about, mutual aid is by request, authorized at the discretion of the agency providing assistance, whereas automatic aid is automatic. It's the nearest appropriate resource, and Area C is dispatched. That becomes important because the limitations of all the other agreements you've seen, if your emergency response is depleted or otherwise unavailable, you're out of luck, whereas in the Area C auto aid, they will keep calling until they get someone to come and fill out the fire response. Arcadia is declaring a financial emergency. Why would we consider an MOU with them? I'll be honest, I can see that going either way. Could make us more attractive or less attractive to them. Honestly, it's going to get political. But the second point that concerns me more, Arcadia is not the only city in the San Gabriel Valley that's going to declare a financial emergency. There's several that are talking about it. I was at a meeting with city managers 2 weeks ago where there's 4 cities who are likely to declare sometime over the summer. So I worry more about, are these cities going to be more or less likely to try and recoup costs for expenditures they have or trying to get reimbursements that they're not contractually obligated to provide. How did all this start? Who initiated it? As far as I can tell, we've asked Arcadia and potentially other agencies over the past 10 years to do a number of studies. It sounds like we have informal communication, and then we break off dialogue, and then we don't go forward. But it's been a decade at least. And I think if anyone says the issue of fire response and safety has not been a constant topic here, would be fooling themselves. We went to council 18 months ago, started talking about a reorg plan. It's been in front of council since then. So it's not a theme that hasn't arisen steadily over the years. So why do this now? Aren't we almost staffed? As I said, we have an engineer's test tomorrow. It's actually the second engineer test we've offered in the past 6 months. I made the mistake 6 months ago of starting to tell the other city managers we're going to be fully staffed. We're going to ask for an auto aid trial period. And then we were unable to certify with the applicants that applied for the job. We were only able to certify 1. So right now I'm being cautious and optimistic that we'll certify 2 more and be fully staffed tomorrow. But even if we are, again, there's no guarantee that the cities in Area C are going to let us enter into this contract. We're going to have to demonstrate through a trial period, and we're going to be in a fishbowl. And one of the more interesting things about the last fire is we had a total of 6 chiefs or battalion chiefs from the other cities on that scene. And it was not a normal thing for that many people to come up and just respond to a random house fire in Sierra Madre. People were interested in how we performed. They wanted to see how we did. They wanted to see how we interacted with the other agencies. In a trial period, this is going to continue, even if we can get into a trial period. Now it's up to us to perform, demonstrate our competence, and to show people that we belong. Well, this is my favorite FAQ I saw on Facebook. So I'm not going to say it's 100% false. I'm going to say it's like 99.98% false, what you're seeing on Facebook. And these are the 4 categories: intentional or unintentional misinformation, speculation, or fact-free assumptions and assertions. And we're saying it in a funny way, but it's true, because anything that's not in the non-binding term sheet, no one knows where that's going to end up. If people say the emergency response will have no one, it's a non-binding term sheet. We haven't negotiated yet. The costs go up, the contract's too long, the contract's too short. None of it's been negotiated. But Facebook has been interesting how quickly misinformation goes viral. So where are we at right now? The study has not taken place yet. It actually hasn't even been approved by Arcadia. So this could be a real quick no. If the study comes back favorably, then an MOU must be negotiated. So if we agree with everything in the non-binding term sheet, then the 2 sides sit down and we start talking about what has to go on with emergency response, length of contract, cost of contract. Then that's negotiated. Then it has to go to multiple regulatory agencies, including LAFCO, Area C, Verdugo, the owners of Verdugo, Arcadia, Sierra Madre. We are at step 1 of a 1,000-step process. And we're starting now with the non-binding term sheet to look at where we're going to be. And the idea that we should be afraid of a study and afraid of getting information back is just a foreign concept. Right now we control our own destiny where we're at, and if we don't keep moving forward on parallel paths, we'll have a decision forced on us. Just like at the end of the Mount Wilson Trail fire, we were nearly out of the mutual aid contract that was cost-free. Right now, we're in a position where we can move down parallel paths. We can negotiate with Arcadia. We can determine if it's feasible, and we can also continue our engineers test, get fully staffed, and ask for a trial period. The goal is automatic aid. Once we're in automatic aid, once we're part of the club, we can all step back, sigh some relief. So what should you do? Be patient, be respectful, voice your opinions. Remember that we're at step 1 of a very long process, and support our employees, particularly the ones taking their engineer's test tomorrow, because that's going to be a big deal for us. How they do is going to be a big deal for us. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Susan and sit down.
Thank you, Gabe. And I see pencils busy, so you guys have been jotting down your questions. I want to reiterate again, please be courteous. We'd like to avoid repeats of the same statements over and over again. And basically, there are 2 types of comments that will come forth. One is a statement. So when you come up to the mic, and we do need you to come and speak at this mic, state your name and do I care what street you live on? Yes. State your name and where you live. And let us know if you're asking a question or just making a statement, so we know the difference. So I'm going to start with someone that I know has a statement to make, a former mayor. We've never been on the same side politically, but I love him. Come on, Glenn Lambden.
Thank you, Chamber. Thank you, Gabe. Actually, the presentation was so well, you pretty much took out like 5 or 6 pages, so I'll just kind of hit a few topics. I remember when I first got elected to City Council 20 years ago, I went into John Davidson's office, And he said, your primary job as a council member is to create and maintain public trust and confidence. And that really stuck with me. And we have a room full tonight, overflow, because I believe that the way this was handled on January 8th damaged public trust and confidence. Sadly, I think our fire department was blindsided the way this was presented. The community certainly was, and I know a lot in the community feel somewhat duped by promises made to UUT tax and so forth. And I really won't go on that. I'm sure others will. I would like to say too that the false information that has been on Facebook also came out of City Hall and council members in the January 8th meeting. I know, and I won't really say names, but some staff 3 times made the comment that we have no written mutual aid agreement. That's not true. We have a 2006 aid agreement in which, like the city manager said, item 5 puts your Madre into a mutual aid position. But we do have that written agreement. The city website also says that we don't have a written agreement. I don't believe that's true. I believe that same 2006 agreement qualifies as a written agreement. It's signed by 11 cities. In the city website, it also states that cities can bill us. But item 7 on that 2006 agreement specifically prohibits them from billing us. They can send us a bill, but we don't have to pay it. At this point, it could be amended and that could change, which is a consideration. But with having said all that, it's kind of, what do we do from here? I just have a few suggestions, and I hope we can do it. First of all, I hope everybody tonight speaks with facts, not just feelings. There's the council agreement on January 8th, I believe, had 4 items of action. One of them was a non-binding term agreement that was approved, and with a $20,000 check that went to Arcadia. Okay, that bus has left the station. But the second one stated that the fire department would be reorganized, period. It was not contingent upon any other action. The 4th action item was the implementation of the reorganization. So I see this as 2 separate actions. We have a fire department right now that it has been reorganized. And basically what that means is elimination of the firefighters, the chiefs, and or the captains and so forth. You know, people could argument that the implementation doesn't take place, or the reorganization doesn't take place if the implementation doesn't take place. Perhaps, I don't think anybody wants to get into that argument, but the fact here is item 2 said the reorganization without conditions or without contingencies. So what I would like to suggest to the council, and Madam Mayor, I think you have a lot of damage control that's going to need to be done. I think you need to show the fire department that your words were serious when you said you support them. I would hopefully suggest or recommend that you rescind the second portion that says you're going to reorganize. If this comes to fruition and you do go with Arcadia, then reorganize at that time. But let these guys know that you support them. And not only support them, you know, let them know that you're in their corner, that you're rooting for them. Fire department, you guys need to pass the test tomorrow. If we're going to have some legitimacy here, we need the engineers. We need to show these other agencies that we're all that we say we are. And the citizens, part of this agreement with all of us, we heard at that January 8th meeting that this isn't about finances and it's not about the budget, it's just about getting into automatic aid. But I don't believe that's totally honest. This has to do with money also. We can't just expect to have a fully staffed fire department without the money. And the question then becomes, where do we get it? Do we go for another assessment, a property assessment, a parcel tax? Do we try to increase the UUT again? I don't think that's going to happen. I think because of where we are today and the reason that this chamber is full, I don't see where in the next decade any city councils will be able to pass any type of tax that goes into the general fund. I think the damage has been done. So possibly we're going to have to consider a parcel tax. But, and this is my opinion, if we do that, if the citizens say we want a fully staffed fire department and we're willing to pay, that has to go directly to the fire department. It can't go in the general fund. So it's kind of, we have a partnership. We have staff and council, we have the fire department, and we have us as the citizens. And I would suggest as the comments go on tonight, please let's not just worry about blame. Let's not, put the blame on anybody. Let's find solutions. And I think we're all in favor of keeping the fire department. And if we want them, we're going to have to step up one way or another. Thank you.
All right, and now we're off to hear from the rest of the community. So I would appreciate, we're not going to do cards tonight, so you won't be yelling at me about picking favorites. But if you have something you'd like to come up and suggest, or a question you'd like to ask, and we have the full council here. Councilman Capocha, I think you missed roll call, but he is here. Please raise your hand and come forward, and if you want to follow this next speaker, get ready. So who's next? Oh, meeting adjourned. Come on.
Don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Bruce Jones, 662 West Allegria. And just by way of credentials, by Sierra Madre standards, I'm kind of a newcomer. Only been here 40 years. However, more importantly, I was on the Sierra Madre Volunteer Department from about 1977 to about 1984. And since then have spent time around public safety as an employee of civilian employee of Pasadena Police Department, and now a volunteer for LA County Fire Department. So all that said, we're in 2005, which is what this is, we had a mayor's ad hoc committee, fire study, level of service, and finance committee. And we submitted a report to staff and the council at that time about January 2005. And some of you may remember it. I'm not going to read it all to you. We'll be here all night, but it's out there somewhere. It may be in the library. It may be, because it's a public document. And what I'd like to say, first of all, is we've kind of walked this path before. And so many of the words that were spoken were considered when the committee met. And our conclusions were quite similar. What I would like to suggest is that we reconvene the Public Safety Committee and we give more thoughtful consideration to this issue, because it's a big issue. It's become a bigger issue than the ones that we were considering. And I'd like to see that. It would allow for public input. It would allow for citizen input and professional input. And that's the suggestion I have, Your Honor, to have you convene an ad hoc committee. Glenn told me that the Public Safety Committee, the current committee, has basically disappeared. Is that right, Glenn? So let's start afresh. And let's do that. And let's give this, it's a very, very important issue. Let's give it some consideration. And then I can come up with another, if I'm allowed to be on the committee, I can come up with another great big binder like this. That's it.
Thank you. One thing I neglected to say, we would like to keep your comments under 2 minutes, and that was great because you had 8 seconds to go. All right. Yeah, that's the tone. Next. Any next comment? Rob?
Robert Jardy, Vista Circle Drive. I might be able to keep it under 2 minutes, but I might have to come back a few times. So I have a question and some comments. I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning of the meeting, but my understanding is, Gabe, you said in the unified response, or the agreement for automatic exchange for fire services in Verdugo, that all the other terms don't apply because of the exception. Is that correct?
I'll answer your questions at the.
Oh, okay. So what I have here is the agreement signed by Sierra Madre, and it has 14 points in it. There's number 1 is a purpose, which I assume applies to us because we've signed into this agreement. There's a duration of the agreement. There's how it's administered. There's a response area, which we're a part of. There are provisions for services, costs and reimbursements, priorities of response, indemnity, liability insurance, a waiver, how amendments are added to it, and how parties operate independently, and about notification. I would think all of those items apply to Sierra Madre because we've signed this agreement. So the only exception that's in here says that Sierra Madre Fire Department will not be dispatched outside of its jurisdiction to provide automatic aid when fires occur in nearby cities. But we will provide mutual aid as requested, and under mutual aid, other fire agencies may respond to Sierra Madre when additional resources are requested. So we very clearly have a mutual aid agreement, but on the city's website, on the FAQ, under the question, we already have mutual aid, which is good enough, or we already have automatic aid, the answer, it says the city does not have any signed mutual aid agreements. But the Verdugo, this very clearly says that we have mutual aid. It says it right there. We have mutual aid, we provide it, and we can receive it. It just says we don't have automatic aid. And that's the only exception. It's not excluding anything else in this report, in the signed agreement. Is my time up? Well, okay. Thank you.
So, Robert, you did miss the part where we went over this. I noted when you walked in. That's okay, though. So I think there's a couple of different ways you can look at this contract. When I look at it, and it's a contract that states it's based on reciprocity, and the title of it is Automatic Exchange for Services, and the exception states that we may receive mutual aid. When the contract has automatic aid mentioned 6 times and mutual aid twice, wants to define it, and only then again in the exception, I would say we can be exempted from the contract, from the cost element based on the reciprocity. However, where we ended that is if I'm wrong, which I'm wrong frequently, that doesn't change the fact that the argument is to get into automatic aid, which is safer, quicker, which is better. And the contract was also noted can be amended at any point. And I had city managers talking with me specifically about amending the contract further. So what we're looking at is how do we get an auto aid, and if we want to get bogged down in an argument of are we in mutual aid or are we out of mutual aid, happy to have a debate on that. That's really not relevant to the discussion at hand, which is how do we get into automatic aid. And if someone can make an argument that the mutual aid that we participate in is as good as auto aid, I'm open to hear that. I haven't heard a lot of that. If someone can say the practice of mutual aid where we don't provide reciprocity, where we don't leave our borders, where we continue to live on the goodwill and the charity of our neighbors is fair, I'm open to that argument as well. But if your argument is technically we have a mutual aid assignment, and if you're correct about that, great. We're still not operating as a good partner in the Verdugo system. We need to be part of the whole, not like the splinter that they're trying to force out. So if we make a technical argument, we're a mutual aid, a legal argument, I'm open to all of it. It doesn't change the fact that we survive solely on the charity of our neighbors.
Can I comment on that?
We don't want, it's early. Hold your thought.
Maybe a comment later?
Maybe a comment later. Well, maybe a comment later. I want to give everybody the opportunity because this is informational and there are lots of questions that people want to ask. Yes, sir.
My name's Phil Cannon, and I live on Edgeview, up at the top of Michelinda. I guess I would wonder if it's possible that the city council and or the fire department get together a cost-benefit analysis of the alternatives so that it would be a little clearer, crystal clear, to the people here and the other people that live here what the alternatives are, what it might cost us, and what good it's going to do. I mean, it's a cost-benefit analysis. It's business, it seems to me. Maybe that's oversimplifying it, but that's what I see is probably needed. Thanks.
Thank you. Next? Really? Yes, sir.
My name is Chuck Curry, and I'm going to make a statement if I can. I'm a member of the Sierra Madre Fire Department. I've been a paramedic with them for 5.5 years. I have the dubious recognition of being the oldest guy on the fire department. I just want to talk really quickly. We're talking about what we don't have, but I want to state what we do have, okay? I've been a paramedic for now, I'm closing in on 40 years. I started in the LA City Fire Department in 1980. Before that, I was on private ambulances. So I've seen just about every configuration of engine company and fire department and ambulance system we can have. And my department, LA, when I was with them, realized in the late 80s the best configuration was to have an ambulance and an engine running out of the same station together, being dispatched together. So we have that right now in this city. That is the best emergency medical service you can get. The idea of an ambulance going on scene and then waiting for a rescue or for a fire engine coming from another city waiting, that can make a difference in a person's outcome. Many times we have what we call in this business scoop and run patients. They're so critical that we take the people we have on scene and get the person in the ambulance to do what we can en route to the hospital as best we can. If we have to wait for an engine company to come from another city, that's going to make a difference in some outcomes. Okay, that's not to be ignored. And let me say something. It's a well-known fact in Southern California, 80% of all calls the fire departments go on are medical, okay? So you have the best you can possibly have for 80% of what you're paying for, okay? A lot is going on. We're talking about automatic aid. You know what? 80%, you've got the very best you can get. Once you give that up, you won't get it back, okay? And that's going to make a difference in some people's lives. Maybe some of the folks sitting in here, some of the people sitting next to you. So let's concentrate on what we have, because once we give it away, it ain't coming back, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Barbara Warner. I live down on East Bonita. In 2007, Greg Christmas and his crew saved my life. Not once, twice. And the fire department. Had we not had our METs and our fire department react so soon, I would not be alive. January 18th, I witnessed across our street this, if our guys were busy, Arcadia coming in. I can't see any names. A gentleman had an emergency. Paramedics that came did not come in a hurry. They were not rushed. They were just kind of strolling in. They checked him, said, "Your blood pressure's all right." He had eaten a hot dog. He threw up, but then he was throwing up blood. And they said, "Are you sure you want to go?" to the hospital. They didn't ask him about his history. He has esophageal problems. This gentleman is alive today because he forced them to take him to Methodist, where he had to be transferred to Huntington, to a thoracic team, wanting to do 5 hours of surgery on him to save his life. And yet, these paramedics that came to see him and take him to the hospital questioned if did he really want to go to the hospital. We have the best in what we've got right now with our fire department and our EMTs, excuse me, especially Greg Christmas.
Thank you. Our next speaker? Really? Come on, you guys. No more questions? Oh, okay. There we go.
Don't say oh no.
I said okay.
I wasn't going to, but not enough people are willing to get up here. Hi. My name's Barbara Velturo. You've all seen all my posts. One thing that, first of all, everyone agrees with you, Gabe. Auto aid is what we want. Auto aid is the best. Auto aid is absolutely the goal. Everybody's. It's the firefighter's goal. They want auto aid. The question is, do we want auto aid but no first response? That's a whole nother subject. What your recommendation, and it said recommends, is that if we can arrange to have Arcadia and get their auto aid, we don't need a first response. We can get rid of our first response. I don't know how many people know, but Arcadia had considered shutting down their station 107 because they have financial problems like we all do. They though did an assessment first. They said, okay, if we shut it down, it would save us over $2 million. There are still 2 other fire stations in Arcadia. They would still have them. They would have auto aid. But they would lose the first response for the area where that station is. They decided that the increased time it would take, oh, I thought that was my buzzer. No. The increased time it would take would end up costing lives, possible loss of lives and property, and also would increase the insurance of everybody in the area, in the town, because they didn't have fire response nearby. So we'd lose our medical first response support for the paramedics. We would have exactly the situation that Arcadia had if they closed that one. And they had decided that that wasn't worth saving $2 million because it would lead to loss of life and property. That's enough. But we do want auto aid.
All right. When you hear the bell, you don't have to run away. Just wrap it up quickly. Yeah, no, that's fine. All right. Next. Come on. Take your time.
Yeah, if you could bring the microphone up here.
I sure can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Jim Foster and live on Old Ranch Road. I'm not clear on all of what might happen if these agreements take place. I like the idea of having our own fire department and a quick response, people who know where Old Ranch Road is, people who know that a large fire truck will not fit on Old Ranch Road. I remember when we had a discussion, it kind of reminds me back when we were talking about getting rid of the police department and having the sheriff up here. And for several months we actually had just sheriffs. One night coming home, I'm past the Jack in the Box. 2 sheriff's cars come out of Jack in the Box and I follow them up here. I'm not sure what the response time from Jack in the Box to Sierra Madre is, but for several minutes, at least, we had no police protection. I would rather have a police department and a fire department up here. If we are short of money, We all agreed to raise our taxes. I don't know if we want to do that again, but several cities, including San Marino, they put a little thermometer-looking thing in the front and say, we need so much money, come and donate. We could do that too. I can give $500 to save the whales, or I can give it to Sierra Madre. It's your choice. But that's just a suggestion. We could just, and then I get a nice big tax deduction out of that too. So I'm all for it. It's a possibility if we're short of money, but I'd rather have our own fire department. Thank you.
Next. Everybody's questions are answered? No. There we go. Don't be shy. This is our opportunity to get information and to speak up.
My name is Beth Copty, and I've lived in town for 28 years. I live on Lima Street, and this past year has been, it's been really difficult to see what has happened in my own home. The ambulance has had to come 4 times in the past about 7 months. The response time was amazing. I no sooner called 911 for an ailing family member who was in very critical straits. As I opened the front door to make sure the paramedics could get in without ramming the door open, I barely got back to the bedroom to start chest compressions, and the paramedics arrived and came directly into the home. I don't think we would get that kind of response time if we asked another city to manage that for us. And maybe that's not what this is about, but I think that it seems to me we may be going in that direction. More recently, a very large tree splintered and fell, and it was about 20,000 pounds of tree that fell across 3 power lines and took them out. And I think I may have been the first person that called the non-emergency number, and the dispatcher, I shared with them, I don't know what happened, but it was a terrifying noise, and please be careful as you come up the street, because I think it happened on our street. And the fire safety personnel arrived very soon. They took it very seriously, and there were downed power lines, and they kept everyone free from driving up to the area and possibly driving over or even walking over power lines in the middle of the night. It was 2:00 in the morning. But the sad thing that happened about a week ago was that my next door neighbor that I lived next door to for 28 years died in his own home in a house fire. And I could have never imagined that something like that would happen in my own town, let alone my own neighbor. But I was not home, but I can say that from the time that my neighbor courageously called 911, the police and the fire department was there promptly. And yes, they did have aid from other cities, because I guess that's the norm, but our fire department was there. They did their very best. They asked the right questions. They cared very much about the person that was inside, and yet they didn't ever betray his privacy. And they stayed on the scene until evening to make sure that there was no more danger. And they came to the home frequently throughout the week to check on us as neighbors and to check on the scene and to use it as a training method. I just really don't get the feeling that every other city is going to care as much about our own citizens as our own city personnel, and that's why I care very much to let you know that this evening. Thank you.
Do we have another speaker ready? Yes, in the back. Would you like for us to bring you the mic? We prefer, come on down, come on down. Pardon? Come on down.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Mary Guiner Schaefer, and I live at 500 East Highland Avenue with my husband, Warren Schaefer. Okay, I'm here in support of the fire department, paramedics, and also the police department. About a year ago, 2018, both of us were hit by the flu, and then I was found out that I had low in hemoglobin, which I didn't even know what hemoglobin is. And the the paramedics came to my rescue twice. First, when I was at the where they were putting out the float. Okay, that was the first time that they took me to Arcadia Methodist, and I had two what do you call that? 2 bags of blood transfusion, like doping kind, to get my my blood up again. And then Kaiser is my provider. Well, misdiagnosed, that I was okay. So I came home the following night, and the same thing happened. My husband had to call emergency again, and paramedics, Sierra Madre, came to my rescue, and then I was again in Methodist. And then my husband came down with the flu. So I was in the hospital, and my husband was home, the paramedics came. So I'm here to support whatever the Sierra Madre paramedics, fire department, police department in our city, to be here. Whatever they need, like, any fundraisers they need, well, I'm at their service, because I owe my life and my husband's life. So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Do we have another speaker? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Mike Adams. I live in Highland now, but last year, because of the paramedics and their response and their quality of service, I believe I'm alive here to talk to you tonight. I do want to add that we need to keep this level of service, but we also need to think about our neighboring cities, and we need to help them. We can't continue to take. We need to be able to give back to our neighbors who need help as well. So we have a great fire department here. Let's continue to help them become the best there is, and help our cities and nearby communities. Thanks.
Next. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Joan McGuire, 180 San Gabriel Court. I have 2 comments and a question because I'm rather late to this, amazingly. One is that I think our paramedics are astounding. I have a neighbor across the street who has had to call them several times, out of control diabetes stuff, and they have saved his life. Very, very quick response. Several years ago, I had an older neighbor who was having similar situations, and that's just the fact of the matter. We have older people, they need this care. So one comment is, I think our paramedics are amazing. I think our fire department is amazing. I think our police are amazing, and I would like to keep them. So my comments are there. One thing I'm not clear on, being late to this, is this a funding issue? Oh, second comment was, yes, we need to support the cities around us and reciprocate to the best of our ability. I really do think that's important. You never know, So, so there's that. Is this a matter of funding? We did the UUT, and I'm retired. I have modest means. I would be willing to pay a tax or a parcel tax or a UUT or stuff money in a boot or whatever it would take. I want to keep our guys and gals, and I want to support them, and I'd like to know a little bit more about the money. Thank you.
Gabe, would you like to answer that?
I can try. So on the question of funding issue, I would say at this time it's not a funding issue, but as we look downstream with all our services, you're going to have to determine how you balance services with costs. So there's right now our total fire budget somewhere between $2.1, $2.2 million fire and EMS. We anticipate adding another $250,000 to $300,000 with that when we're fully staffed to be about $2.5 million. 18 months ago at this time, I believe our fire budget was about $1.6 million. So we've already made significant investments in that. If you look at the other two single station fire agencies, one San Marino, one is South Pasadena. Their budgets, South Pasadena is $4.6 million. And San Marino is $5.1 million. We have about the same number of FTEs. So to get fully staffed is not a funding issue. We have the funds to become fully staffed. We have the funds to be a career department. To do that, we cut our library funding in about half. We closed it for a day, cut our public works team in half, quit filling positions in finance, quit filling positions in planning. I forget all the other positions we quit filling. We added in the full-time fire only added about 15% increase in overall staff in the city. So as we look today, we can afford to be a career department. As we look down the road, there's going to have to be decisions that are made on the types of services we provide in the general fund. So San Marino has a UUT, South Pasadena has a UUT, San Marino has a parcel tax dedicated to public safety, South Pasadena has a parcel tax dedicated to a library. I haven't done an exhaustive search, but I believe out of all the cities in LA County, we're the only one that is full service with regards to what we provide in the general fund and don't support that with some type of parcel tax. In Monrovia, for example, they have a parcel tax dedicated to pensions, but still for every dollar you're taxed here, you'd be taxed $1.37 there when you look at the direct and overlapping debt to include assessments. So that's a very long way of saying when the engineers pass a test tomorrow, we hire them as full-time, we're fully staffed career department. We have the money to do that. We have the money to grow it a little bit. But when we start talking about looking like our neighbors, having the same equipment as our neighbors, having the same pay as our neighbors, we're a long way from doing that. And this community is going to have to decide to balance services and cost.
What other downstream services?
Excuse me?
What other downstream services?
I'm saying downstream costs. So the personnel costs will increase over time. We have a lot of our paramedics that have spoken on this are getting paid about $15 an hour. When you look at the what our captains make, it's comparable to like a firefighter 2 in another agency, right? So when we look at the costs of what we have here and the service we provide compared to what other cities provide, it's not comparable. It becomes very difficult to continue to provide a level of service without funding streams to match that. So, what's that? That's true. We contract with Arcadia for battalion chiefs. All the other cities have battalion chiefs, with the exception of South Pass and South San Marino. I just mentioned they both pay for 1.5 battalion chiefs, and they split them. So again, as we evolve, there's going to be additional costs that become associated with it. To date, to become a career department, the choices we've made is we're going to cut the library funding in half. We're going to close it for a day. We're going to cut public works in half, and we're going to take those funds and we're going to put them into fire because that's where the priorities are in public safety. But at a certain point, you're not able to function and operate if you keep making cuts. So again, right now, we have the funding. We look forward. Our funding position is strong. at some point, the same way as when we had the debate with police, and we matched costs for police today versus outsourcing, and we decided we'll keep police, which I think was a good decision. The costs for police for personnel from that point have increased dramatically, and we would anticipate the same. So the mayor's wants to mention that the proposal for fire response services doesn't eliminate the paramedic positions here. So 80% of the calls that are handled by paramedics would still be handled by the paramedics. One of the things, a lot of the questions we have is how would the response times change, or would we have to wait for an engine? One of the things you do in the study is determine a response time out of Arcadia for 107. How long would it take them to get there? And would there be a longer response time, and is that acceptable? So when we looked at the most recent fire, the difference for them to get from 107 to where the fire was at versus us was 10 seconds. That's obviously anecdotal. It's going to change in every fire. But what we want to look at is, are we able to get quality of services that maintain the level of services we have? And if that's not something that can be achieved, then that's not an MOU that's going to come back in front of council.
All right. Now, I would like for us to remember that we're recording this, and we need every speaker to come forward and speak into the mic. So if you have additional questions you would like to ask, we ask that you come forward and
Because of the recording, yeah?
Yeah.
So Gabe, I thought you...
So come to the mic, yeah, and the camera, and your name and your street.
My name's Gail. I'm at 727 Montecito. So you answered the question about whether this was a funding issue by saying no, but there are downstream services that would be. My question is, I want to know what those downstream services are. When I asked the question for my chair, maybe it wasn't clear, but you stated cost, and then you mentioned employment cost of the fire department. I want to know and understand what downstream services that the city of Sierra Madre provides us are going to be impacted in a funding situation, if you can answer that.
You want to use this mic, Gabe?
Do you want me to just, I mean, with all due respect, I mean, the personnel costs are a huge part of that, right? And I think Gabe did mention that. You look at our peer departments in cities that would look a lot like us, San Marino, South Pasadena. If we pay our firefighters what, frankly, they deserve to be paid, if we staff like those department staff to look like them, we hire battalion chiefs, which we would have to do, hire a full-time chief, like we would have to do, and we staff up, that's where a lot of those costs are coming from. The services are the services. I mean, so I don't think Gabe was going to come up here and say anything different. I really think it really is a personnel staffing, professionalizing a department. And
Go deeper, from the 15 people we have on staff today at this department with one full-time chief in place, what are the impacts?
I think you're going to see, you know, and this is all hypothetical. You're asking a hypothetical question, I'll give you a hypothetical answer. You're going to see more paramedics, you're going to see more fire medics, you're going to see potentially more captains, potentially at every level being paid more. You're going to be seeing at least one, if not two, battalion chiefs, and you're going to be seeing a chief. Frankly, we're getting the best bang for our buck right now. We get a chief that doesn't get paid like a chief. You're going to get a chief if you want someone who is willing to take this job that you're going to have to pay like a chief. So, you know.
You're referring to our current chief from Arcadia, that came from Arcadia.
Yeah, Chief Norwood, I am. So, it's right. And look, I knew Gabe was going to say basically that anyway. So I wanted to get up here and just make sure. I'm John Harbedian, so I'm the Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Oh, you again. That's okay. Come on.
I'm still Phil Cannon. That was pretty clear. I mean, costs of business go up. Costs of employees go up. Pensions go up. What's new? What's that got to do with the mutual aid, automatic aid problem that we seem to be
discussing, or at least that's what was discussed for the first half hour. I don't understand it. I mean, we're talking about costs, we're talking about people, we're talking about services, and then we're talking about these two variables of being able to respond to other cities the way they can respond to us. But if we've got 15 people and we've got battalion chiefs and all this stuff, why do we need any help from anybody else? It sounds like we'd be pretty self-sufficient. It sounds like. So I'm getting a little confused. Thanks.
So my wife asked this question in the car today, so I'm prepared to answer that. The answer is, the end game, again, is to get to automatic aid. And the reason why you want to get to automatic aid is to, in a situation in which there are numerous emergencies going on at the same time, we can have automatically dispatched rigs from other departments and other cities come here. And I think that no one would debate that the biggest existential threat to this community, given our geography, is a massive fire that would take us out. In automatic aid, we will have automatic response from other cities, from the county Forest Service, which we already have. And you're nodding that you get it now, but I'll finish. That is the end game, is really to make sure that we have that. And the costs, and I'll take some blame. At the January 8th meeting, I said, this isn't about funding, this isn't about money. Truthfully, every decision we make as a council is about money. If we had a blank checkbook, we would be building our own fire department without question. We would have a lot more officers on the street. We would have a public works department that Chris could actually manage without, figuring out how to manage with less people than he needs. I mean, we would have a city just humming with more people. So everything is about money. And I think what Gabe was trying to say and what I'm trying to say is we're taking dual paths and we're looking at this option because we may be actually in a point very soon where we are just building our department. That's going to be a lot more expensive. It's going to take a lot more time. One option of going to Arcadia is we could potentially get there to automatic aid quicker at a more reasonable price. So it does come down to money, but we are driven by public safety, how to make us safe to get into automatic aid. So, and Phil, if you want to, sorry, you got to come back up. I'm sorry.
Would we have a smaller department if we had automatic aid?
If we had automatic aid, would we have a smaller department? No, that's not. The size of our department, if we were going to build a department for automatic aid, as Gabe said, technically, if we get the engineers passed, we would technically be a fully staffed department. Whether we are allowed to get into automatic aid, we're not the ones that decide that. It's the other peer agencies. And it's not a simple, you check these boxes and you're in. We hope if they pass, they let us in. But again, there would still be more staffing that would have to go on after that probably. Again, battalion chiefs, hiring a full-time chief, et cetera. So, yeah.
Yeah, because you're forcing us to. So John, with that comment that you just made about the end game, can we see the transparency to the return on our investment for the next 10 years, and I would even go higher than that, on that end game, the way you say that that's the only end zone we need to be shooting for? I'd like to have a lot more confidence in your end game as a taxpayer and a homeowner here. So we mentioned transparency from last meeting. I'm not seeing any of those numbers or those financials and those statistics. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just answer really quickly. Yeah, I mean, it's, fair enough. Yes, the answer is yes. I think to answer some of the critiques that we've had, January 8th as a process, and that's on council, should have and could have went better. That wasn't a staff issue. That was us, how we conducted maybe that conversation. So, yeah. No, but and to answer your point, yeah, we're going to be a lot more transparent. Phil already said what would be great would be, a full cost-benefit analysis. Let's talk about the costs and let's talk about, the benefits. Undoubtedly, that's what we're going to do. And that's why we're here today, frankly. I mean, I think, we just want to say that January 8th could have went better. We're here now. To the extent the firefighters, the department felt blindsided, personal apology from your council. I mean, that in no way was our intention. You can ask any of the council members, you can ask staff. I mean, to the extent that it did come as a blindside, totally sorry. Apologies. I mean, you're our full-time employees. You still are. No employee has been eliminated. No position has been eliminated. So we do apologize for that. So, and transparency, absolutely. I mean, that's a no-brainer. So.
Okay, you got 2 minutes too.
Yeah.
And while we're at it, we do have a number of our paramedics, firefighters, and police officers in the house, and I kind of feel like when your kid is you're at a parent-teacher conference and your kid is right there and can hear you talking about them. But let us acknowledge the fine work that they do and give them a round of applause. Okay, next. Well, no, I'm going to take these two guys in the back. You can come back later. Okay. All right. Yeah.
They're going to bring the microphone. No.
I really didn't think Bud wanted the mic. He's following orders.
My name is Bud Switzer. I live at 315 1/2 West Montecito. But I moved recently from 101 East Allegria about 6 months ago. But I have to say something about George Maurer, who set up the ambulance program with the insurance. Now, my wife had quite a few problems, and I'd like to say a lot about the ambulance service in Sierra Madre. They've been absolutely terrific. Now, my wife, over the years, probably had anywhere from 4 or 5, maybe six times that they've come to my house, gave her a thorough examination, which took a few minutes, and got her to the Arcadia Methodist Hospital. So I really support the current ambulance service with the insurance program that we have now. And even me, once on the 101 East Allegria, they took me and they did a thorough examination on me because I'd passed out a couple times the day before, so they took me to the Arcadia Hospital because I was low on blood, dehydrated, and all that stuff. Now, I've had one ambulance call on 315 1/2 West Montecito, but if you got one of these little devices that call the ambulance service, it gets triggered somehow. And this got triggered accidentally somehow. They were there in about 2 minutes. And I had to convince them, I'm not hurt. Fine. Somehow it was in my pocket and they got triggered. I didn't know it, but I don't put it in my pocket anymore. Anyway, I want to thank the ambulance service for Sierra Madre and George Maurer for setting it up for a great service that saved our lives for a long time. Thank you.
Well, my name's Robert Taylor. I come from an era on the fire department. I joined back about 1968, 69, when we were all volunteer, and we were very well respected throughout Southern California. We went to campaign fires. I was an engineer for most of my time in the fire department. I became a lieutenant, and very briefly before I retired. I had to retire because of heart problems, but anyway, we went to campaign fires all over California, and very well respected by all of the different fire departments throughout. We were even requested to go to campaign fires, brush fires, as far away as San Luis Obispo. I think we even went to Oregon a couple of times by request. And so, as a volunteer, there was no question as to when we would respond. We were all mostly EMTs at the time I was on the fire department. And our EMTs were very well respected. The fire department has had historically growing pains, and what we're going through now is not unfamiliar to me. However, it seems like the community has a vested interest in our fire department. They have always treated us very well, respected us, and supported us. Back in the day, we used to go out at Christmas time, pick up old toys and fix them, and redistribute them to kids in town who had no more money or no Christmas presents. We would do that sort of thing. We used to fix our own equipment. I drove one of the old Crown fire engines. It was all stick shift. There was none of this automatic, nice, air-conditioned fire engines like we have now. The city is growing, and I think as a citizen of Sierra Madre, we need to take a really good hard look at how our fire department grows and take a vested interest in how it grows. Talk to the firemen. Go to the fire station. They'll talk to you. They'll tell you, hey, we had a really good fire last week. You know, firemen like fire. They get out there and do their thing. But yeah, our city manager, I think, is trying to do us do a good job in a hard situation. So give him input. That's what this is all about tonight. It's just that the people of Sierra Madre have always taken this town to heart, and that's what we need to do. We need to be as a community. You know, these guys in blue up there, they put their lives out there in front of it, and they, you know, I've been in situations where burnt the paint off the fire engines. It came so close, but that they put up with that. They do that. Right now, I'm volunteering with the police department, and I started volunteering with the police department when the police department was having trouble. And being on the fire department, I knew a lot of the officers, and I said, well, you know, I have heart problems, but that doesn't stop me from driving a volunteer patrol car. You know, I can go out and represent the police department and do some good there. So I've been volunteering since I moved into town. I'm from rural Texas, and as a kid, we had volunteer fire departments around the area where I grew up, and I always wanted to be a fireman. You know, I was on a bicycle going down the street, you know. Well, that was that's the way I wanted to grow up. That's what I am now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, you wanted a second chance.
I've wanted to say this for a long time. It'll take less than 2 minutes, believe me. And I think some of the people like Bud and Glenn and some of the people that have been around here for a while, the city of Sierra Madre is like an HOA that has 10,000 people. And if we want anything, we have to either do it or buy it. And there was some talk about the thermometers. There were 2 in Kirsting Court in my time in Sierra Madre. And we bought 2 ambulances out of community funds. That's just what we did. And I certainly want to tip my hat to George, because about the time I came on the fire department, he had a 1964 Chevy station wagon parked out in front of the print shop, and he would be the first to respond. I could tell you a lot of history, and you know, it's good stuff to talk about around a campfire, or maybe the Historical Society will give me a shout. But really, we are just a big community, and sometimes we just have to rely on ourselves. If you think about it, you know, seem to have had water problems a lot lately. And if everybody were to take a $20 bill and put it in their water bill for a couple of cycles, we could do a lot. And maybe that's what we need to do, is to look at the spirit of cooperation and say, well, yeah, we don't need a lot of official stuff. We'll just pick it up and do it ourselves. So I'm all for Sierra Madre. By the way, if anybody is old enough, Bud, you'll be, that horn used to, well, I'm not that old. But anyway, back in the 50s when I was a kid, I heard that fire horn for the first time. And I was standing out in front of the fire station. And believe me, it was an experience. The siren will be much better. That's it.
Thank you. John, so two things that you said that really trigger my thinking is that this issue that we're talking about and the cost and the projections, the end game is about safety. And then you also mentioned Chris and Public Works Group. And there's been a lot of projects in the last 2 years since I've been a homeowner here. The lighted crosswalks, the sidewalk on Mitchellinda, the new handicap crossings and entrances to those. Do those fall under the same budget of handicap or of security and safety? I want to see the full picture. I want to see the full budget. Is there a place I can get that, or do I need to request it, or?
It's called the city manager.
Okay.
He'll sit down with you.
So Gabe and I can sit down and go through that whole budget. I'd like to see how those other projects and how those decisions are made by the folks that make those decisions to spend money on all of the safety projects as opposed to this safety project, because there's a way to weight those, I think. And I'd like to see that. So Gabe, I'll get on your calendar, I guess.
Okay. Any other? Oh, hold on. Yeah, I'll get you, Bob. I'll take.
David Johnson, Olive Avenue. As we talk about this, there's a lot of passion, but I think transparency is the number one. What I'd like to see is, I'd really like to see a cost analysis broken down in all the options, and I'm not sure why LA County Fire wasn't considered as an option. I had a chance to talk with the fire chief after our last meeting, and I'd still like LA County to be considered as a possibility. The risk assessment, I don't know what the fire growth is, how fast in a residential or a commercial situation, but that's going to have a direct impact on how much money I want to spend for having an engine here. And then the service level agreements, other than just response time, we need to understand what we're buying and what we're going to take a look at. I think that from a citizen standpoint, I was shocked when we heard this was coming on, and there was only two options. One option was our department had to come up to speed, but there was an illusion that they'd never be able to do it. I think they can, to get to auto aid. The other option was look at Arcadia. I think there's other options. I'd like to take a look at all the other options, and I'd really like to understand what the cost is, not only from a safety standpoint, but also expense. And it should be 1 to 10 year possibility. And whenever we do a cost analysis like this, to possibly outsource something, it should be for a minimum 5 years to a 10-year outlook.
Who was next? Someone else. Oh, okay, Bob.
Robert Jardy. First, I'd like to say that I don't think it's fair to say that we are keeping our paramedics and getting rid of the firefighting, because our firefighters are part of our paramedic service. Every time the rescue ambulance goes out, the fire engine goes out with them, because maybe you're doing chest compressions, someone's getting medicine into the patient, someone has to go and, oh, we need this, they're going back and forth. Maybe a patient's upstairs, they have to be carried downstairs. We need our fire department. And yes, maybe Station 107 is going to then come, but they're going to be delayed. But when you say we are keeping our paramedics. I say we aren't, because our firefighters are part of our paramedics. I want to read something that we were told was very important, just over 2 years ago, by our city council, that it is important to maintain services that citizens value and expect to keep Sierra Madre a full-service city of its own, with its own police, fire, paramedics, and library, and that we needed the UUT to maintain our current level of services. So at that time, we were under mutual aid. So there's an expectation that by approving the UUT, we'd be keeping the level of services that we have. We were told that if we didn't approve that, we'd face devastating cuts where one or more major departments could be outsourced, or public works, or public safety, or community services are significantly curtailed. And if Measure UUT fails, the nature and character of this safe, self-sustaining village will change for the worse. But that's what's being proposed right now, that we will not be self-sustaining, that we will be outsourcing. So what happened to this foundational principle that our city council was pushing for? They told us the only way to keep Sierra Madre the very special community it is to approve the UUT, which we did overwhelmingly. But now you're saying that doesn't matter. I mean, that we're going to outsource these anyway. So it feels like a little bit of a bait and switch here. But we are reelected this council because I think you guys are great. So I don't know what happened and why this change is happening. Am I done? You're done. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Laura Hodge. I live on East Grandview, and I'm a relative newcomer because I came here about 50 years ago. And I was a young girl, and at one point, City Hall and police and fire department was not here. It was over on the other side of Sierra Madre Boulevard near Windsor. And we modernized, and part of that was, if I recall correctly, we purchased coin sets, gold-plated, I'm sure. I thought they were real gold. And that was to raise funds for our beloved, not just our local, but our beloved fire department and police department. And, sorry, I'm looking at Brett and Roxy, and Bud Schweitzer, and all the OGs that have been part of the city. Not just part of the city, but really part of the heart of our city. And I don't doubt that the fire department in San Marino and South Pasadena are top-notch and care about their citizens and respond with the full level of service, because that's what firefighters and law enforcement do, and dispatchers and paramedics. That's just what they do naturally. But a lot of our fire personnel, men and women, are part of our community. They don't just fight fires, but they're part of our community. So for me, I can't even imagine living in a town without our own fire department. Like, why bother at that point? It's like having a factory with nobody in it. There's no people running the factory. There's a dog and a guy. And the dog is there to keep the guy from touching the machinery, and the guy is there to feed the dog. Like, why bother? There's just no purpose to me. So the other thing I want to say is that there was a little tongue-in-cheek bullet point on your presentation, Gabe, about Facebook and social media, but I want to say thank you personally to Carol Canterbury and Barbara Velturo, because if Carol had not posted the agenda the day of the meeting, I believe, or the day before, I wouldn't have known. Now, I'll take the blame for that because I don't check the agenda every 2 weeks, but I do now. I go online and I check it, and I challenge you all and urge you all to do the same. That's the kind of pact We have as citizens. And I've been remiss in doing that. But in addition, social media and a lot of the comments, a lot of clear thinking from Barbara Velturo. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's not all accurate, but at least we got some information, which, quite frankly, it really hurt my heart to hear and see that city council meeting online, because I watch from home while I'm cooking dinner, and think, oh my God, what the hell is happening here to our fire department? Now, I appreciate that apology, but let me just tell you, I felt stabbed in the heart, and I don't even work for the fire department. When that went down, and I can just imagine the shock that they had when they read that. Now, maybe it's it could have been handled better, yes, and there's a lot of information that came out today that makes it very clear. Auto aid is really, really important. But if we don't get that auto aid, I can't even imagine living in this town without our own fire department. Like, we went to the map for the police department. Like, what is the point? That man on Lima who perished in a fire, like a week after that city council meeting, I can't imagine what would have happened if we had to wait for 107 or somebody else from Arcadia. Perhaps it would not have, it would have been the same response or the same outcome for his house. But what about the neighbor's house? Fires spread super fast. So I want to say thank you to Barbara and Carol. And I remember the day we all bought coins for the fire department. So please don't doubt our love, deep, abiding love for this fire department, the former firefighters and the current firefighters and our law enforcement. Thank you.
Are all our questions answered? No, Bob. Barbara, you're in the bubble. Oh, you're one, come on. Exact 2 minutes. No, I said you're on the bubble. I was thinking about it.
Okay, these are all questions. Okay. The first one is, I mentioned about Arcadia and that they'd done an assessment and said if they lost first response, even with auto aid and even with 2 other fire engines, it would end in a potential loss of life and property. Why do we think, one question, why do we think that it is different if we lose our first response and have auto aid? That's that question. The other one is, your proposal says that you recommend these things. One of the recommendations is if you reach an agreement, a satisfactory agreement with Arcadia, you recommend the reorganization. Will the citizens have any say in that final recommendation, or is it just going to be up to the city council? Because your proposal says that if you reach the agreement, they're going to agree to the reorganization. I don't think that should even be considered without the people having a say. Third one is, have you ever looked at what it would do to our insurance to not have first responders in town? There's a lot of people who say in town they can't get regular insurance through insurance companies because we're at the bottom of a mountain with a lot of potential fire danger. A lot of the insurance rates are likely going to go up for everybody in town if we don't have first responders in town. So 3 things. Have you looked in the insurance? Why you think Arcadia's assessment wouldn't apply to this town losing its first responders? Oh, and then just one other thing. Other than the contract, I know.
You got 18 seconds.
Other than the contract being interpreted differently by Gabe than by Robert, for instance, what are the things that you see that are incorrect on social media? Because I'd like to hear what they are. Because we try to be very factual in the things we present. Give me a list if you like, later if you like.
All right. Do you want to answer that now? Because I was going to we have council members who want to speak, and I think this gentleman, and so.
Let's let Gabe answer the questions.
You will let you guys off the hook? Okay, go ahead, Gabe.
So the primary difference, I think when Arcadia completed the assessment, is they're currently in automatic aid. So they're comparing taking an engine that's in automatic aid and removing it and remaining in automatic aid. For us, the assessment we have to make is it better to be in automatic aid than to be in mutual aid? Now, if the question is, if we're in automatic aid right now, and then we're contracting with Arcadia in that example, if we're both in automatic aid, that's a more straight comparison. But if you look, one of the things you have to do in the assessment, again, is determine if getting an automatic aid with Arcadia is going to provide sufficient response times to maintain the level, type, and quality of service that we have, but also to maintain the level, type, and quality of service that they have. So as you go through the assessment, if you look at it and you find that right now, for example, in the past year, we hit our NFPA response standards for fire 50.5% of the time, meaning it's 5 minutes or less. If we do the assessment with Arcadia and we find that we're not going to be able to maintain that response time, again, then the MOU is not going to be able to move forward, because part of the non-binding term sheet is to maintain the quality of service for the agency.
Before you go on, that's not exactly what I asked. I wanted to know what's different. They said there'd be a loss of life in service by losing first responders.
Right. Again,
Even with auto aid and even with other firing, you're saying that we wouldn't have the same loss of life and property?
no. So again, what Arcadia is doing is making an assessment based on the known factors that they have 3 stations in auto aid. The assessment we're trying to make is we have no auto aid, and what is the better outcome? Automatic aid with Arcadia, or continuing without automatic aid with the status that we have now? So that assessment, again, is part of the thing that the study's going towards. And if we're not able to get sufficient satisfactory answers, then we're not going to be able to come to an agreement on that.
What's the timeline of the assessment?
So again, the study has not even been approved by Arcadia yet. So it could go to their council and get voted down, and then there would be no study. So this is not, no, they'll give 20,000 back.
Do they hire the third party to do that, or just?
So the way the non-binding term sheet the question was, do they hire the third party? Is it their staff time and personnel cost will be covered, and if a third party's hired, that the 20,000 will go towards that, but both parties shall have sufficient input on the design of the study and how it's going to be conducted.
But Arcadia
So,
is not an independent situation.
So-
They want to get the business, so why wouldn't we insist
Well,
the third party?
again, I don't, that's a common misconception. That's one thing, Barbara, we can add to the Facebook misconceptions that I've seen. Arcadia is not, one of the things they put in is they don't want to lose their Class 1 or their Tier 1 status. So going through the F.A.Q process, so the Local Agency Formation Commission extends the municipal boundaries legally of Arcadia for fire protection. So if in the study they go through and they say, well, the cost is right, we think the service is right, but ISO, the individual insurance agent that rates this, says we're going to lose our Tier 1 status because we have to cover more people, then Arcadia's already said in the non-binding term sheet they're not going to go forward with it. There's things that they need to protect as well. So they have to look at doubling their call volume. What does that do? How does that impact their service? So the same way that we want to make sure that through the course of the study that the decisions you're making are responsible. Arcadia is not looking at cashing a check and then putting their people in jeopardy by doubling their call volume and extending their municipal boundaries and putting at risk their Tier 1 status. So if...
Lady.
But you keep saying study, and there's nothing in your term sheet that says study. That you're negotiating the term.
So
Oi.
I know, yes, if you
Okay, thank you. We don't want to have a lot of back and forth with the audience. We've been doing great with organized, come to the podium, etc. And your 2 minutes are up. So there are a few other people that have some questions. So, scram.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, everybody, there are a lot of questions. We certainly aren't going to get all the answers we want tonight, but we do want to give everyone the opportunity to answer those questions. We have some council persons here. We discourage talking back and forth from the audience because that just gets out of hand. And well, we scheduled one meeting for Gabe. You might be the second one. Yeah, and maybe one of the council persons would like to deal with that. It is 7:44. We've been here almost 2 hours, and we are losing some of our audience, and we don't want to do that because I think it's been, we've got a lot of information. You can go back and consider. This will be available to listen to it. Now, I was told audio only, but it looks like maybe video and audio, so you'll be able to go back and listen to the questions. And I think I made a Facebook post and encourage you to contact your city council persons politely. I'm all for politeness. When you look at the replay, if you have additional questions, you can direct it to them and to Gabe and to whomever. Council persons, who wants to volunteer? You bet. Okay.
Elected officials never pass up a chance to talk or a microphone. I thought our city manager did a wonderful job in presenting information and factual stuff, but what I want to do as an elected official is, first of all, I want to point out that I'm also a newbie here. I've only lived here 36 years. But I want to just say this, myself and the other council members, they all live in this community, and why would any of us want to do anything that would jeopardize our own our own safety and the safety of our children? So we're one of you. And again, this is a great thing about Sierra Madre, when there's a big issue, that you all come out. But I've said it before and I'll say it again, this is a small town. Any one of myself or my peers is willing to talk to you at any time. All you need to do is send an email, pick up the phone and call. Say it again, my number is 355-6407. Call. My name is John Capocha. You should all know that. I'm your elected official. I've been on the council for 7 years. But anyway, thank you all for coming. And this is exactly the kind of feedback that your elected officials need to hear. It's great to hear that there's an overwhelming support and value to our fire department. But again, as an elected official, our responsibility is much more broad. It's public safety, but it's everything else that everybody in the community wants, and we're struggling to balance that. So we do need to hear from you. So thank you very much for coming out.
All right, and with that, Jean, did you?
Just one thing.
Just one thing.
Hi, everybody. Gene Goss, council member now. It's my 5th year, so behind John by 2. My number is 355-7257. Email ggoss at cityofsierramadre.com. I have received 5 emails since this all started. So I know that things are going on Facebook, but it's not, we don't consider it appropriate to engage in those. There could be Brown Act considerations and things of that nature. So certainly contact any one of us. I've just given you my email, my number. I'll meet you at Beantown if you want to have a cup of coffee, whatever. This is obviously critical to all of us, and we want to get it right. And this is a great way to do that. So thank you for coming.
We're going to wrap it up with our Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks. Yeah.
He's the last voice you'll hear.
That's it. That's it. I just want to say thank you all for coming. Look, my number, and this is truthfully 626. I don't have a landline. It's part of our generation. 626-616-2095. I'm not on Facebook. As soon as my parents got on Facebook, I got off. Again, it's an ageist thing. So I just think that I haven't logged on in 6 years. To sit here in this room and hear this is really invigorating. I mean, I think that this is an emotional process. As council members, I'll just say we don't have the luxury of being emotional about it. We have to make evidence-based policy decisions, and that's what we're going to do. But this is totally an emotional issue for this community. And to see all of you coming here in support of your firefighters and support of this community, we couldn't ask for more. I mean, we'd love to see you at more of these council meetings. Gabe would love to see you in his office, I'm sure. But there's a lot of good points that have been brought up tonight. I think Mr. Johnson brought up a good one about exploring other options potentially. And look, I assure you, we have talked to LA County, we've talked to the city of Pasadena. The first conversation, the only conversation that we had was not with the city of Arcadia. But we are keeping our paramedics. I don't care what anybody says. That is undeniably the truth. We are keeping them, and they're not going anywhere. Secondly, if there is any confusion about whether we have reorganized this department yet, I'll put it on the agenda to make sure we clarify that item number 2 was not approved in and of itself. We have not reorganized the fire department. So I want everyone to go home and enjoy their families and stay safe, because to be honest with you, that's what's motivating us up here. So thank you very much for coming, and call us. Call us if you want anything.
So thank you all for coming. Again, this is the beginning of the process. We appreciate everybody coming out. Email us. I, like Councilman Goss, have not heard from many people, so we certainly want to hear from you. But I do have to do the official and get it and close the meeting, because we did have this as a special meeting. So I do need a motion to close the city council meeting. All in favor? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.